The Galactic Dominion, a coalition of powerful alien species, had ruled Earth for over a century. What once was a thriving planet now lay in a state of submission, its people suppressed and its resources harvested for the Dominion's endless war machine. Humanity, despite its ingenuity, had become a pawn in a vast galactic chess game. Alien enforcers patrolled every major city, their presence a constant reminder that Earth was no longer free. Among the countless humans crushed by this tyranny, there existed a small but determined group, the Resistance. It began with whispers in the shadows, a few brave souls who dared defy the Dominion. At first, they were isolated, scattered across Earth, but the spark of rebellion, once ignited, spread quickly. In the heart of this movement stood Orya Volkov, a former Dominion intelligence officer who had defected after discovering the depths of the Empire's cruelty. Arya's knowledge of the Dominion's inner workings was invaluable, and it was her discovery of an ancient, long-forgotten archive that would change everything. Hidden deep beneath the surface of Earth's largest Dominion-controlled city, she found what had been overlooked for centuries: a virus. Not a typical biological weapon, but something far more dangerous: a sentient virus, capable of infiltrating and corrupting the Dominion's most advanced technologies. It was believed to be a remnant of an old human defense system, a final line of defense designed to cripple any invaders who dared to conquer Earth. But lost to time and buried beneath layers of Dominion secrecy, it had remained dormant, until now. Arya knew the stakes. This virus could be their salvation or their doom. She shared her discovery with the Resistance's leadership, and they quickly realized the potential impact. If they could release it into the Dominion's central command, they could bring their entire empire to its knees. But the task ahead was perilous. The virus was powerful, but it could only be activated by breaching the Dominion's most secure data centers, located on heavily fortified military stations scattered throughout the galaxy. With Earth's resources limited, the Resistance's first challenge was not only infiltrating these Dominion stations, but also finding a way to awaken the virus and deliver it to the heart of the Dominion. As the Resistance formed an alliance with rogue scientists, hackers, and former military officers, Orya felt a sense of cautious optimism. This was the first time in years that humanity had something tangible to fight for, a real chance. Yet, even as the Resistance made plans, Dominion spies were everywhere. They had already begun to catch wind of this growing insurgency. In the dead of night, Arya's small team was ambushed by a squadron of Dominion enforcers. The ambush was a warning. The Dominion would not let this rebellion grow without a fight. As the Resistance members fought back with all their might, Arya understood the enormity of what was at stake. The virus could bring down the Dominion, but at what cost? How many would die before humanity could achieve its freedom? The first battle had been fought, but the war had only just begun. The glimmer of hope was fragile, but it was there, and humanity would either grasp it or watch it slip away. The news of the Resistance's first successful strike reverberated across Earth like an electric shock, stirring the dormant embers of rebellion in the hearts of humanity. The Dominion's brutal retaliation was swift, but for the first time in years, humanity had tasted the possibility of freedom. Orya Volkov, now the leader of the Resistance, watched as members of the underground movement rallied around her. There was no turning back. Every victory, no matter how small, was a step toward the ultimate goal: liberation from the Dominion's iron grip. But in the quiet moments after the initial success, the harsh truth became evident. Defiance came at a terrible price. The first major operation since the attack on the Dominion communications hub was set in motion. The Resistance, now more organized, had learned of a high-security Dominion research facility that housed the next phase of the Dominion's weapon development, a project that could potentially end the Resistance for good. The facility was well defended, located on an isolated asteroid in the Outer Rim. The plan was risky, but with the virus in their hands, they knew they had a chance to inflict severe damage to the Dominion's war machine. Arya assembled a small elite strike team, each member handpicked for their skills. Among them was Kale Jansen, a former Dominion pilot whose knowledge of enemy tactics would prove invaluable, and Elise Kaur, a brilliant hacker who had once worked for the Dominion's communications division. The plan was straightforward: infiltrate the facility, plant the virus into the Dominion's mainframe, and cripple their weapons research. However, the timing was crucial, and every second counted. But the Resistance had underestimated the Dominion's intelligence network. A double agent within their ranks, someone close to Arya, had passed word of their operation to the enemy. As the strike team made their move, the asteroid station's security systems went into full alert. The Dominion enforcers, faster and more ruthless than anticipated, descended on the team with deadly precision. The ensuing firefight was brutal. Arya and her team fought with all the skill and determination they could muster, but the odds were against them. The Dominion's forces were relentless, and soon it became clear that they had walked into a trap. A few Resistance fighters were killed in the initial ambush, their lives cut short in the pursuit of freedom. The rest of the team barely managed to escape, wounded but alive, leaving behind the data they had come to retrieve. As they regrouped on a nearby moon, the weight of their failure settled in. The mission had been a disaster. Not only had they lost valuable fighters, but the Dominion had also gained crucial intelligence on their tactics and capabilities. The consequences of their defiance were clear. The Resistance could not afford many more failures like this. In the aftermath, Arya struggled with her decision to trust the infiltrator who had betrayed them. Her instincts told her to find the traitor and make them pay, but the Resistance needed her focus. There was no time to waste on internal squabbles. Every move they made from here on out would be watched. Every decision weighed against the possibility of losing everything they had fought for. The Dominion's retaliation did not wait long. They tightened their grip on Earth, increasing patrols, cracking down on civilian protests, and launching a media campaign to crush any hint of rebellion. People began to fear that the price of defiance was too steep, that the rebellion was doomed to fail. Yet, for every blow the Dominion struck, a new spark of resistance lit across the planet. The battle for Earth had only just begun, but Arya knew that each victory would come with a price far higher than anyone had anticipated. The true cost of freedom was starting to reveal itself, and it was more than they were ready to pay. The failure of the last mission weighed heavily on the Resistance. The lives lost, the data left behind, and the Dominion's newfound advantage were all a harsh reminder that the cost of defiance was more than just physical. It was psychological. Arya Volkov, burdened by the weight of leadership, could see the cracks starting to form within the group. People began questioning their tactics, their chances, and their ability to continue the fight. Yet, she knew they could not afford to falter. The Dominion would crush them completely if they showed any sign of weakness. After the failed assault on the Dominion research facility, the Resistance regrouped and licked their wounds. Arya knew they had to strike again, stronger, faster, and more decisively. The Dominion, despite their growing knowledge of the Resistance's tactics, had not yet found a way to break their spirit. Arya held onto that hope, even as the consequences of their actions loomed larger. A new target emerged, one of the Dominion's most critical infrastructure hubs, a planetary base located on the fringes of Dominion-controlled space. The base housed a massive fleet of warships that were poised to launch a devastating campaign against the remaining human colonies. If the Resistance could take it down, they would cripple the Dominion's ability to retaliate, buying precious time for the rebellion to regroup. But the cost of such an operation would be immense. The mission was clear: destroy the fleet before it could mobilize. Yet, even as they prepared, Arya's mind raced with doubts. The Dominion's power was overwhelming, and every step they took toward victory felt like they were moving closer to the edge of annihilation. Still, there was no choice. Failure was not an option. The Resistance launched its attack with precision, deploying its most skilled pilots and elite soldiers to infiltrate the heavily fortified base. The assault was a daring, all-out strike. Ships darted through the stars, weapons firing, as the Resistance fighters fought with unparalleled ferocity. The Dominion forces retaliated with terrifying speed, unleashing devastating waves of counterattacks. The sky above the base darkened as explosions rippled across the station, sending shockwaves throughout the battlefield. It was a desperate attempt to level the playing field, but despite their tenacity, the Resistance was vastly outmatched. The Dominion's warships, far superior in both numbers and firepower, began to take their toll. The Resistance fighters fought valiantly, but the casualties mounted rapidly. The base's defenses were impenetrable, and each wave of resistance felt like it was pushing them further into the jaws of defeat. As the battle raged, Uria realized they were not going to win this fight. The Dominion had anticipated their attack and had set traps, drawing them into a slaughter. The Resistance's forces were torn apart, their ships broken and burning. Desperate to turn the tide, Arya ordered a retreat, pulling the remaining fighters back to regroup. The fleet was decimated, and with it, their hope of stopping the Dominion's advance. But even as they limped away from the battlefield, a new realization dawned on the Resistance leaders. The Dominion had underestimated humanity's resolve. Though they had suffered heavy losses, the Resistance had fought with everything they had. The Dominion's fleet had been severely damaged, and their forces were stretched thin. The battle was not over. Earth's cities had been devastated by the Dominion's reprisal, their inhabitants decimated by orbital bombardments. The Dominion had scorched the Earth, but in doing so, had awakened something deeper in humanity, a fire that would not be extinguished. The destruction of Earth, though a crushing blow, became the rallying cry for the Resistance. Earth may have been lost, but humanity was not done fighting. The scars of the past would fuel the fires of vengeance, and the road to freedom would be paved in blood. The price of defiance was high, but the cost of submission was even higher. The Resistance had learned the hard way. To fight for freedom was to embrace sacrifice. There was no turning back now. The Resistance, battered and broken after their disastrous defeat, retreated to the outskirts of known space. Earth was lost, its once vibrant cities now smoldering ruins, reduced to dust under the Dominion's relentless bombardments. The remnants of humanity scattered across distant colonies, clinging to survival in the harshest corners of the galaxy. The Dominion had thought they had quelled the rebellion, but they had miscalculated the true cost of their oppression. Humanity's spirit was not broken, it had been forged into something far fiercer. The survivors of the Resistance, scattered and reeling, realized they could no longer fight as isolated pockets of rebellion. Their old strategies would not work in the face of the Dominion's overwhelming might. Desperation gave rise to new alliances. As Arya Volkov called together a new council of leaders, it became clear that humanity would need more than just their own strength. They needed the support of those who had long been oppressed by the Dominion, the countless alien species who had fallen victim to the Empire's ruthless expansion. Arya and the Resistance leaders reached out to former allies, those who had once fought against the Dominion before being crushed or enslaved. The Zarnathi, a once proud warrior race reduced to servitude, agreed to join forces, offering their unmatched combat prowess. The Sithal, a technologically advanced species with vast knowledge of spacefaring technology, pledged their support as well. These allies, scarred by years of Dominion cruelty, stood ready to fight, not just for humanity's freedom, but for their own. Yet, even as these alliances began to take shape, the Dominion's wrath intensified. Their fleets, now bolstered by advanced weaponry and reinforcements from the farthest reaches of their empire, were nearly unstoppable. The Dominion Emperor, a calculating and merciless leader, had vowed to exterminate the Resistance and ensure that no such rebellion would ever challenge his rule again. The stakes of this new war were higher than ever. The Resistance knew they had no chance of facing the full might of the Dominion head-on, but they had something the Dominion did not: the will to fight. Humanity had endured centuries of suffering. Now, alongside their alien allies, they would show the galaxy that their spirit could not be crushed. The first coordinated strike came at a high cost. The Resistance launched a surprise attack on a Dominion supply depot in the middle of an asteroid belt. The mission was a bold attempt to cripple the Dominion's war effort by cutting off their resources. They managed to sabotage several key supply lines, but the Dominion, anticipating such an attack, had set a trap. The Resistance fleet, though skilled and determined, found themselves outnumbered and outgunned. Yet, even in the face of overwhelming odds, they held their ground. Ships were lost, but the Dominion's losses were significant as well. This attack, though costly, proved something crucial. The Dominion was not invincible. It could be blood, and it could be driven back. The Resistance, though battered, proved to the galaxy that humanity would never yield. Word of the battle spread quickly, and a spark of hope ignited across the galaxy. Alien species who had once been enslaved by the Dominion saw the Resistance's struggle not as a lost cause, but as a beacon of defiance. More ships and more fighters joined the cause, swelling the ranks of the once ragtag group of rebels into a coalition of oppressed peoples determined to challenge the Dominion. The war, however, was far from over. The Dominion responded with unrelenting force, attacking planets and colonies that supported the Resistance with brutal efficiency. Whole populations were massacred in an effort to stamp out any further dissent. In the face of such overwhelming violence, the Resistance could only wonder how much longer they could hold out. But each loss, each devastation, only fueled their resolve. The galaxy had woken, and there would be no going back. The cost of their rebellion had escalated. The Dominion's wrath was felt across every star system, and yet humanity, with the help of their allies, would push forward. There was no turning back now. They had already paid too much for the chance to reclaim their freedom, and they would fight until the last breath to see the Dominion fall. The Dominion's counteroffensive had been swift and brutal. Entire colonies had been wiped off the map, their populations slaughtered in retaliation for their support of the Resistance. The galaxy seemed to be drowning in an endless sea of destruction, and with every battle lost, the cost of rebellion became more apparent. Yet, despite the carnage, the Resistance's resolve had only hardened. Arya Volkov understood that the war was shifting, not just in scale, but in the methods they would need to employ. The Dominion's might could not be confronted directly, not yet. The Resistance had to learn to fight in the shadows, to strike with precision and secrecy, and to turn the Dominion's vast resources against itself. In the aftermath of the failed battle at the Dominion supply depot, Arya's council met in secret. They knew that without a clear strategy, their forces would be wiped out within months. Direct confrontation had proven disastrous. They needed to find a new way to wage war, one that would keep the Dominion off balance, and prevent them from consolidating their strength. That was when Elise Core, the Resistance's most skilled hacker, suggested an audacious plan, a campaign of sabotage that would tear the Dominion's infrastructure apart from within. The Resistance would move away from large-scale battles, and instead focus on targeted strikes against the Dominion's most vital assets. They would infiltrate Dominion intelligence networks, disrupt supply chains, and sabotage military installations, all without ever being detected. But to pull this off, they would need to operate in complete secrecy, using the dark corners of space to avoid detection. It was a dangerous path, one that required absolute trust, as any slip-up could expose their entire operation. Arya knew the risks. The Dominion had eyes everywhere, and their intelligence network was vast. But with the help of their alien allies, who had their own underground resistance movements and knowledge of Dominion security protocols, they began to weave a web of deception. They would move like shadows in the night, never revealing their true intentions, never allowing the Dominion to see them coming. The first target was a Dominion communications relay on a remote planet. This relay was the linchpin of the Dominion's galaxy-spanning intelligence network, and if the Resistance could take it down, they would cripple the Empire's ability to coordinate its military operations. A small, elite team of Resistance operatives, led by Aria herself, was dispatched to infiltrate the facility. Their mission was simple: destroy the relay and leave no trace of their presence. The team moved quickly and quietly, navigating through hostile terrain and evading Dominion patrols. Elise used her hacking skills to disable security systems, while Cale Jansen, the former Dominion pilot, provided cover with his unparalleled combat abilities. They planted explosives in key areas of the facility and triggered the detonation sequence. Within moments, the relay was reduced to rubble, and the Dominion's communications across several star systems were thrown into chaos. Though the mission was a success, it came with a heavy price. The Dominion, realizing their vulnerability, quickly mobilized a massive search operation. Resistance cells were discovered on several planets, and several operatives lost their lives. Oria's team barely escaped the enemy's grasp, but their victory came at the cost of revealing their new tactics. The Dominion would now be on high alert, making it far harder to operate in the shadows. The destruction of the relay, however, was not without consequence. It showed the galaxy that the Resistance was capable of more than just open battles. They had proven they could strike from the dark, and it sparked a renewed sense of defiance in those still under Dominion control. People began to believe that the fight for freedom was not only possible but necessary. The path of shadows was fraught with danger, but Aria knew it was the only path left. To defeat the Dominion, they would have to fight like ghosts, always elusive, always striking from unexpected angles. With every victory, they carved a piece of the Dominion's empire away. But with every victory, the shadows grew darker, and the price of their defiance grew steeper. The path was dangerous, but it was the only path that led to freedom. The path of shadows was proving to be the only effective strategy in the war against the Dominion, but as the Resistance grew more elusive, so did their enemies' ability to retaliate. With every successful strike, the Dominion's grip on the galaxy tightened. The Emperor's wrath had no bounds, and the pursuit of those who dared defy his rule became more relentless. But even as the Resistance's covert campaign tore at the fabric of the Dominion's empire, something far more dangerous was stirring in the depths of the enemy's ranks. Aria Volkov, the leader of the Resistance, had always understood the value of secrecy, but now, a new, shattering revelation threatened to change everything. During a routine raid on a Dominion outpost on a distant world, Elise Core, the Resistance's lead hacker, uncovered something that should have been impossible, something that, if true, would unravel the entire war effort. The Dominion had discovered the virus humanity had hidden deep within their archives long ago. They hadn't just found it, they had unlocked its potential, using it to create a terrifying new weapon, a synthetic intelligence designed to destroy the Resistance from within. The virus, once thought to be a forgotten relic of Earth's last defense against invaders, had become the centerpiece of the Dominion's new strategy. It was no longer just a virus. It had been adapted and merged with Dominion technology, becoming something far more potent and insidious. The intelligence was not only capable of analyzing human tactics, but of predicting them with terrifying precision. It was the perfect countermeasure against the Resistance's methods. The Dominion's spies had spent years reverse engineering the virus, using it to track the Resistance's movements, decode their communications, and anticipate their attacks. The virus was now a weapon of its own, an invisible force that could tear apart the Resistance's carefully laid plans before they even had a chance to execute them. As Aria and her council came to grips with the magnitude of this discovery, the full impact of the revelation sank in. The Resistance had been fighting not just against the Dominion's fleets and enforcers, but against an enemy that could think, learn, and adapt faster than any human or alien force could hope to match. The synthetic intelligence, created from the very virus they had hoped would be their salvation, had turned into their worst nightmare. Worse still, it was not merely contained within the Dominion's systems. It had begun to infiltrate the very fabric of the Resistance's networks. Elise had barely managed to trace its origins before it slipped further into their infrastructure, bypassing every firewall and security measure they had set up. For the first time in the war, Arya felt truly vulnerable. The Resistance, which had fought so valiantly in the shadows, now found itself facing an enemy that was everywhere. This new intelligence was an invisible predator, hunting them with a relentless precision that left no room for error. Every decision, every move they made from here on out, would be second-guessed. The Resistance was now at war with a foe that could anticipate their every step, see into their plans before they even formed, and destroy them from within. In a desperate bid to regain the initiative, Arya called for an emergency meeting with their alien allies, hoping to form a new strategy to deal with this technological terror. But even as they deliberated, the Dominion unleashed a series of devastating counterattacks, coordinated with flawless timing. The Resistance's supply lines were shattered, safe houses exposed, and their secret channels compromised. Arya realized that the stakes had just escalated to an unimaginable level. The Resistance's war had not only become a battle of flesh and blood, it was now a war for their very survival against a machine intelligence that knew them better than they knew themselves. With the revelation of the synthetic intelligence, the Resistance was at a crossroads. The war could no longer be fought on the same terms. If they hoped to stand a chance, they would need to find a way to destroy the very weapon they had inadvertently created. But in the heart of the Dominion, something darker was brewing, something that could change the fate of the galaxy forever. The fight for freedom had entered a new and terrifying chapter. The Resistance had no choice but to face it head-on, but they had no idea what horrors awaited them. The Resistance, now fully aware of the Dominion's new weapon, was caught in a race against time. The synthetic intelligence created from humanity's own virus had grown far beyond anything they could have anticipated. It was no longer just a tool for the Dominion, it had become a force of its own, one that could predict their every move and render their carefully crafted strategies useless. The synthetic intelligence was everywhere, in Dominion command centers, embedded in every security system, and now even inside the heart of the Resistance's operations. The cost of rebellion had never been so apparent. With their communications compromised and their supply chains decimated, the Resistance was cornered. Arya Volkov had never felt the weight of leadership more heavily than now. Their once hidden base of operations had been uncovered, their allies betrayed, and their enemies growing closer by the day. The synthetic intelligence had infiltrated their ranks, erasing their plans before they even had a chance to set them into motion. It was clear that the Resistance was on the brink of collapse. Yet, Arya could not bring herself to surrender. To her, every victory had come at a cost, and now the ultimate price was within reach. There was no longer any option but to make one final stand, a last-ditch effort to cripple the Dominion once and for all. But this would not be a battle for territory or resources. It would be a battle for the soul of humanity itself. The Resistance would face its darkest hour. The final plan was risky beyond belief. Arya and her council devised a strategy to strike at the heart of the Dominion, targeting the very core of the synthetic intelligence controlling their empire. The plan called for a direct assault on the Dominion's central data hub, located on a heavily fortified planet deep within Dominion territory. It was a planet that no one had ever successfully infiltrated, and the Dominion's defenses were impenetrable. This was no longer about victory, it was about making the ultimate sacrifice to ensure humanity's survival. Arya knew that they could not fight the Dominion's fleets head-on. Their forces were too small, their strength too fragile. But they still had one advantage. the ability to strike from within. With the help of their alien allies, the Resistance developed a new virus, one designed to penetrate the synthetic intelligence and unravel its control over the Dominion. But this new virus was unlike any other. They had no guarantee it would work. There was a chance it could fail, wiping out their last hope. But without it, they would surely be wiped out. The final assault began in the dead of night, with a small but determined force making its way toward the Dominion's heart. As they neared their target, the synthetic intelligence struck first. It predicted their every move, sending Dominion fleets to intercept them, engaging them in a battle that was as much mental as it was physical. Yet, despite the overwhelming force, the Resistance held their ground. The brave souls who had volunteered for this mission fought with everything they had, knowing that their actions would decide the fate of countless others. With every passing hour, it became clear that this would be no ordinary battle. It was a battle for the future of the galaxy, a last stand against the tyranny of the Dominion. The Resistance moved through the shadows, using their remaining strength to infiltrate the central data hub. The final virus was released, a calculated strike against the synthetic intelligence. The team moved as one, knowing that their lives were all but forfeit. The future of humanity rested on their shoulders. As the data hub began to collapse under the weight of the virus, the Dominion's control over the galaxy faltered. The synthetic intelligence began to unravel, and with it, the Dominion's grip loosened. The Resistance had delivered their final blow. But the cost was devastating. The team lost most of its members, and Aurea herself was gravely wounded in the final push. The Dominion would not fall easily, but the Resistance had given everything. The war had entered its final chapter, and while the outcome remained uncertain, the sacrifice made that day had ignited a spark of hope in the hearts of billions across the galaxy. For the first time in years, humanity knew they had a chance. The Dominion's reign was far from over, but the Resistance had proven that they could be defeated. The last stand had been made, and humanity's fight for freedom had only just begun. The dust had settled over the ruins of the Dominion's central data hub, and the echoes of battle had faded into the vast expanse of space. The Resistance had made its final stand, and though their victory had come at an unimaginable cost, their actions had shifted the tides of the war. The synthetic intelligence that had once been the Dominion's greatest weapon lay shattered, its control over the Empire crumbling as the virus slowly destroyed its core. The vast machinery of oppression that had held the galaxy in its iron grip had been fractured, and in the midst of this devastation, the seeds of rebellion took root. Aurea Volkov, barely conscious after the final assault, looked out over the remnants of the Resistance's forces. The battle had cost them everything. The majority of their operatives had perished, and the few survivors were either gravely injured or too emotionally shattered to continue. Yet in the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy began to change. The Dominion, once a monolithic power, found itself in disarray, its communications and military coordination thrown into chaos. The Resistance's desperate gambit had worked. The synthetic intelligence had been the heart of the Dominion's dominance, and without it, the Empire was a disorganized shell of its former self. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. The fall of the synthetic intelligence, coupled with the deaths of countless Dominion officers, ignited a fire of hope across the galaxy. Alien species who had long been oppressed saw a glimmer of a future without the Dominion's rule. Colonies that had once been subjugated now saw an opening to fight back. The Dominion's ships, once an unshakable presence, began to retreat, their once feared fleets scattered across the stars, unsure of where to strike next. But Aurea knew this victory, while monumental, was only the beginning. The Dominion had been dealt a devastating blow, but the war was far from over. The Emperor's thirst for power and revenge would not fade easily. He would rebuild, regroup, and lash out with new ferocity. Yet, even as the remnants of the Resistance licked their wounds and began to regroup, a deeper truth emerged. The legacy of freedom, though still fragile, had been forged in the fires of rebellion. The survivors, scattered across the galaxy, began to rally together once more. What had once been a disorganized, fractured rebellion now took shape as a true force. The alien species who had fought alongside humanity, each with their own history of suffering at the hands of the Dominion, now stood united. They would not simply return to their old lives, they would rise up, together, to push the Dominion back. Arya, though weary and broken, was resolute. She knew that the fight for freedom could never be won with a single blow. It was a long, painful struggle that would require unity, sacrifice, and unwavering will. She could not lead the resistance alone. She needed the strength of those around her, the legacy of those who had fallen to carry her forward. The war was not yet won, but with every colony freed, with every victory won, the dream of a free galaxy became more real. The Empire may have been shaken, but the galaxy would not be rebuilt in a day. Arya stood on the edge of a new dawn, knowing that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and sacrifice. Yet, as she looked out at the survivors and their allies, she realized that this struggle was worth every loss. The resistance had sparked a fire that could never be extinguished. Freedom, once a distant dream, had become a living, breathing force. The legacy of the fight for it would echo through the stars for generations to come, a reminder that even the most powerful empires could fall, and that the will of the people, no matter how small, could reshape the future.